There were a few updates from the Ontario government on COVID-19 today. Here are a few of the main ones. The Ontario government will allow some paused medical activities to resume on Monday, including pediatrics, diagnostic services, and cancer screenings. But this does not mean all hospitals will immediately resume surgeries. Dr. Kieran Moore announced that also as of Monday, most businesses will no longer have to collect contact tracing information from patrons.
We also learned details as to who is specifically eligible for Ontario's batch of Paxlovid antiviral drugs, and it includes older individuals who are unvaccinated. Here to help us unpack all of the updates are Dr. Peter Juni, Scientific Director of Ontario's COVID-19 Science Table, and Nelson Lee, Interim Director of the Institute for Pandemics at U of T's Dalla Lana School of Public Health. Dr. Juni, first to you, what does today's announcement mean for patients who have had surgeries delayed by a month or even longer?
Oh, we'll need to see, we still have a lot of challenges. Remember, we have a plateau of hospital occupancy, and ICU occupancy is also still stable, high, and this won't change just immediately. This is really just a plan for the future, and it will depend on the hospital. Some hospitals might start again, others not yet. We see just how challenged the healthcare system is.
And Dr. Juni as well, when we take a look at the announcement today about contact tracing that is going to end on Monday for some businesses, I mean, was this quite effective throughout the pandemic anyhow? I know there's times I've gone into businesses and people that work at businesses are busy. They don't have time to remind me if I've missed to fill out the form. Were you finding that was effective from a data perspective at all?
It's very difficult to tell. It makes theoretical sense, and it depends on how this is being handled. What is very clear is this is a bit like rain gear. Rain gear works relatively well if it's just raining properly, but if you're in the middle of a storm, things are different. That's a bit of an issue here. It is also a capacity issue. We're currently having an estimated 40 to 60,000 infections per day in Ontario now, and it's very difficult to handle that with a tool like this. Therefore, from purely a pragmatic perspective, it makes sense just to say, okay, we just let this one go. It can make sense in a different situation. There were many parts of the pandemic where it made sense. Now is not one of those.
Mr. Lee, over to you. What is Paxlovid, and how does it work for people who don't know?
Well, Paxlovid is a newly approved oral antiviral treatment for SARS-CoV-2. It's got two components, actually. One is the metrovir, and the other one is ritonavir. So there are two compounds there. And these is a specific inhibitor of the virus polymerase. Is an enzyme, and is designed to intervene at the virus life cycle to stop its replication. So based on the latest released clinical trial data, which has involved over 2,200 patients at risk of developing severe illness, patients treated within 5 days from symptom onset with this new drug were able to achieve an 88% reduction in risk to the combined endpoint of hospitalization and death compared with placebo. So by 1 month, the hospitalization rate was about 0.08% in the treatment group versus 6.3% in the placebo group, which is a very significant result. And there was 0 death in the treatment group and 12 deaths in the placebo group. And also, they measured the virus titer changes, the viral load changes. There was a 10-fold decrease in viral load relative to placebo after 5 days. And these drugs are pretty well tolerated with mild side effects.
Mr. Lee, also in terms of other groups, we know at this point it's starting with older individuals, those who are unvaccinated older individuals. In terms of a timeline for other groups who might be able to benefit from this antiviral drug as well, what do you anticipate, at least for our province?
Well, actually, based on what we have so far, based on the available clinical trial data, we are quite confident that the new treatment can reduce the risk of developing severe disease in the high-risk individuals. What we are not so sure is whether it will work equally well in the standard risk patients without a lot of risk factors. And as far as we know, that there's an ongoing trial to look at the standard risk patients, and the preliminary results are actually looking good with a significant reduction in hospitalization. But we're waiting for that to come out. But I would say that in practice, prescribing these drugs can be a little bit tricky logistically, because we gotta check for potential drug-drug interactions in individuals who are taking long-term medications, because these drugs can interact with something like cholesterol pills, blood thinners, antidepressants, cardiac meds, etc., and other antibiotics. So it needs to be carefully checked by the healthcare providers and the pharmacists.
Thank you so much for that. And Dr. Juni, one of the things that perhaps struck some people today is Dr. Kieran Moore said quite clearly that we have to learn to live with COVID. He said that clearly today. So what does that mean when you consider, I remember about a year ago or so, Steiny Brown, who's part of the science advisory table with you, said there'll be other variants. There could even be an Ontario variant. What does this mean when it seems like there really is no end in sight?
Look, we will need to change our attitude. So Omicron is highly, highly transmissible. The point with this variant really is, if we were to completely suppress this wave, bring case counts down again, the moment we would loosen restrictions, it would just start again. So this is no option. It doesn't make sense. And the few places in the world that still try COVID-0, they struggle, and that's very clear. So we need to change things now. The point right now is we will need to ride out this wave without overwhelming the healthcare system. Therefore, we did the absolutely right thing around New Year's Eve and restricted our contacts and then imposed some public health measures. And now we just need to move on, meaning we need just to gain back our control. We have it right now, and keep it just at our side, meaning a lot of people need to get their third doses who haven't gotten it yet. And there will also be a lot of people who actually will get immune through infection. That's inevitable. And it's also, tragic actually that we have a vaccine preventable events that still will happen. But after the Omicron wave, one thing will have changed. This is that nearly everybody in this province will have had some exposition with the virus or with the vaccine. This changes things, and we will move closer to endemicity and also closer to living with it.
Dr. Juni, I wanted to circle back a little bit to that first question in terms of what we're looking at for surgeries in terms of resumption on Monday. Now that we have this announcement, what do you expect in terms of how long it's going to take to play catch up? I know at one point we were hearing years. What do you think now?
Oh, I'm the wrong person to ask, since I'm not involved, in the specific plannings. But what we just need to have really is a recovery plan, and that's a longer-term plan. We really have an issue here with, with literally tens of thousands of interventions that could not be done, and this cannot be just fixed within the existing capacity. There needs to be a longer-term recovery plan here.
Getting back, Dr. Juni, to my previous question to you is, this is something we have to learn to live with. I wanted to ask you, does any of your data explore how many variants of concern we could anticipate? I mean, there's already been so many, but there have been, Delta and Omicron that have really had an unfortunate impact.
Look, right now we're just in the middle of this wave worldwide. In many, many places, loads of people are just getting infected as we speak, meaning there's fertile ground for more variants, and it's actually inevitable. It's just statistically speaking, it's a certainty there will be new variants coming. The real change that we're experiencing right now is that at the end of this wave, nearly everybody will have had some immunity, and we have, the cellular immunity, B cells, T cells, long-living plasma cells that will help us then to fight fight back against the virus if we get infected again. And also remember, there will be updates of the vaccines, and we will probably be much closer to the situation we're having with influenza. Fingers crossed, that it also depends on the variants coming, of course, in autumn, so that we then just have a possibility to have an updated vaccine and then move into autumn with relatively little precautions. There may be some that will be needed, but it should actually get easier. The perfect curveball, of course, would be if we would get a new variant that is even more transmissible or evades the vaccine even more. Let's keep our fingers crossed. I'm actually relatively optimistic right now that we can move into spring and then enjoy the good weather and be outdoors, and that this will help together with the immunity that we experience because of the Omicron wave and the successful rollout of the third doses and first and second doses in kids.
Mr. Lee, to you now. I know we've been talking about this antiviral drug. What do you expect to see from other companies? I know Pfizer's kind of led the way with this, but what do you expect to see from other companies, and how long do you think it'll take before we start to see other companies making a very similar type of medication product?
Well, I'm sure that there are actually two antivirals being approved in the U.S. Only one has been approved in Canada so far, and I'm aware that there are other new medications being developed. So I won't be surprised to see there are new drugs are coming out very soon. But I think the overall antivirals will be useful adding to our treatment arsenal and may assist in pandemic control. It remains to be seen how these antiviral treatments may impact on hospitalization rate. I guess it also depends on how many cases we can treat. But generally speaking, we can also expect some reduction in onwards transmission. With those treated patients will have less virus to transmit the disease. And that is evidenced by previous influenza medication research that can reduce transmission. So we remain, I think that it remains to be seen, and this is something that we definitely should look at. And the other point is that the antiviral medications are generally less effective by the emergence of virus variants. As published in a new study published in New England Journal of Medicine just this 1 to 2 days, these oral new antiviral drugs are still very active in vitro. They're active against Alpha, Delta, and even Omicron. So I think that it's a very useful tool adding to pandemic control.
Okay. Dr. Juni, Nelson Lee, thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.